Hey everyone, in this video we are going to be talking about biomes. So if we think about ecosystems and the different levels of ecology that we're going to be studying in our natural world, biomes are what we consider the biggest level. So instead of talking about a single ecosystem, which is that interaction between all the living and non-living components in a given area, we're going to be looking at biomes, which encompass ecosystems that are the same throughout the entire world, not just in one particular spot at a given time. So by definition, what makes a biome relies on two main factors. It's an area that's going to share the same average climate. And climate encompasses both temperature and precipitation. And what makes these biomes unique and separate from ecosystems is that an example of a particular biome might be the rainforest. There's more than one rainforest ecosystem throughout the world. There's the Amazon rainforest. There are rainforests in central parts of Africa. So they belong in this biome because they have the same climate, same temperature and precipitation on average. And the way we can look at these biomes is by looking at a graph called a climatogram. So a climatogram takes into account both temperature and precipitation on the same graph. So in this one, the bars represent precipitation month by month over one full year on average. And then the orange dots and lines represent the average monthly temperature. And you can use this sort of information to determine what biome you are in. Because if it's a rainforest, there should be lots of rain throughout the year. And typically they are also warmer, especially in summer months. Don't really get super cool in those winter months. It pretty much has a temperature that's constant throughout the year. And so if we take all this information, we have different categories of biomes. And we can look at it on this graph that compares precipitation versus temperature. Now, these endpoints are not concrete, which means, these temperatures and precipitation patterns might change and vary, especially as our climate is changing. But typically speaking, to be in a tropical rainforest, it needs to be both warm throughout the year and rainy. To be in a temperate forest, there should be seasons where there's, warm summers, cool winters, and sort of middle of the road precipitation. To have a temperate grassland, again, temperate refers to seasons, so having warm summer, cool winter, and lower precipitation compared to a forest because less precipitation equals less trees. Taiga is typically cold throughout the year and has much less precipitation than those temperate forests. Tundra tends to be cold and dry. Think of it as a cold desert, where deserts are hot and dry. So these are sort of the guidelines that dictate the different biomes. But again, as climate's changing, the specific average temperature and precipitation values might end up sort of shifting for these different biomes. Or I should say, where you are in the world, your biome might be changing because of that changing climate. And so we can look at a map of where in the world we find our different biomes. And latitude is a big factor in where we find the different biomes. In these sort of predictable patterns, typically we're going to see tundra and taiga biomes above the latitude 60 lines. So especially 60 north. So thinking about northern parts of Canada, Greenland, northern parts of Europe and Russia, they have these cool climates and have the precipitation throughout the year that would match either of those biomes. Temperate biomes typically fall between the 30 and 60 degree latitude lines. That is where you're going to experience those seasons. Deserts typically fall around the 30 degree latitude line, which is sort of a misconception. People might think it's at the equator at the 0 degree latitude line because it's hot, when in fact most deserts are sitting around that 30 north, 30 south line. And what you find around the equator are your tropical rainforests, where it's hot but also more precipitation. Now, when it comes to biomes, the living organisms, the biotic factors that are found in a biome are unique to that biome. So, for example, if you're looking at a desert biome or a desert ecosystem, the animals that you're going to find in that desert have specific traits that made them they are adapted to live in that particular biome. So camels, for example, they have, as well as cacti, have the ability to store water. So when they're in that really dry period, there's very little water to be found in their biome, they have the water that they need for survival. So all the organisms that you find in certain parts of the world are there because they're adapted to the abiotic conditions of the biome. Now, as I sort of alluded to earlier, that when we have climate patterns that are changing, that could result in a shift of where we find these biomes on Earth. So for example, you're looking at a little animation here showing the distribution of where we find temperate grasslands in the United States or North America. And what's expected to happen, we can look at it from past where this biome was found, 1890 through present day, somewhere between 2010 and 2030 there. But after 2030, it's projected that the temperate grassland is sort of going to expand northward into what would be typically taiga zones up in Canada. And that is because our climate is changing. As that area dries out and experiences warmer temperatures up north in that Canada region, their biome is going to shift. And that might result in a shift in the different biotic life that would be found in that particular area.